the end of everything. At 55 years old, Michael Carter sat in his truck in an empty parking lot, staring at a cardboard box containing 32 years of his life, a coffee mug with his name on it, a plaque for 25 years of service, 3 framed photos of his kids, a calculator he'd used since 1991, and a letter that started with "due to restructuring." After 32 years at Anderson Manufacturing, Michael Carter was unemployed. He'd started at that factory right out of high school, 18 years old, eager to work, proud to have a steady job with benefits. He'd worked his way up from the assembly line to shift supervisor. He'd never missed more than 3 days a year. He'd trained hundreds of new employees. He'd dedicated his entire adult life to that place, and they'd let him go with 2 months severance and a handshake from a manager half his age who couldn't look him in the eye. This is the story of what happened next. How a 55-year-old factory worker with a high school education and no computer skills became a successful entrepreneur earning over $400,000 a year. But getting there required confronting every fear he had, learning skills he thought were impossible, and starting completely over when most people his age were thinking about retirement. It required failing publicly, being rejected repeatedly, and discovering strength he never knew he had. Michael Carter grew up in Detroit, Michigan, in a working-class family where college wasn't even discussed. His father worked at an auto plant for 40 years. His mother was a nurse's aide. They owned a small house, paid their bills on time, and considered themselves fortunate. You get a good job with benefits. You keep your head down, you work hard, and the company takes care of you. His father told him over and over, that's how you build a life. That's how you take care of a family. Michael believed that. He believed it with everything he had. He followed that advice exactly. He met Linda at a church picnic when he was 22. She was a secretary at an insurance company, with kind eyes and a laugh that made him feel like anything was possible. They got married a year later, bought a small house in Warren, Michigan, and had 3 kids over the next 8 years. Sarah, then Marcus, then Daniel. Linda stayed home with the kids until they were all in school, then went back to work part-time at a dentist's office. Michael worked overtime whenever it was offered, sometimes pulling double shifts during busy periods. They weren't rich, but they were comfortable. They took modest vacations to Lake Michigan. They saved what they could for their kids' education. They went to church on Sundays. They had barbecues with neighbors in the summer. They did everything right. Everything they were told would lead to a stable, secure life. Michael was good at his job. More than good. He was reliable, skilled. Someone who understood not just how to do the work, but why it mattered. He could diagnose production problems by sound, knew every machine on the floor, could train a new employee in half the time it took anyone else. When the company needed someone to train new hires, they picked Michael. When they needed someone to troubleshoot production problems, at 2 a.m., they called Michael. When they needed someone to work the holidays so younger employees could be with their families, Michael volunteered. He thought that loyalty meant something. He thought that 32 years of showing up early, staying late, and never causing problems would count for something. He thought the company would take care of him, just like his father said. He was wrong. The signs had been there for years, if he'd been willing to see them. The company got bought out by a larger corporation in 2015. New management came in from California and New York, wearing expensive suits and carrying laptops, talking about efficiency metrics and optimization. They walked the factory floor with clipboards, analyzing every process, timing every task. They brought in consultants who'd never worked a day in manufacturing, but had impressive degrees and PowerPoint presentations. Automation increased. Robots started doing jobs that 3 people used to do. The workforce started shrinking through what management called natural attrition. They stopped replacing people who retired or quit. Younger workers with college degrees got promoted over long-time employees like Michael, who'd worked their way up on the floor. But Michael kept his head down and worked hard, just like his father taught him. He figured if he just did his job well enough, made himself indispensable, proved his value every single day, he'd be safe. The older guys who got let go, they must not have worked hard enough. They must have complained too much. They must have done something to deserve it. That's what Michael told himself. Because the alternative, that loyalty and hard work didn't matter anymore, was too frightening to consider. In March of 2019, his manager called him into the office. The manager was 34 years old, named Brandon, had an MBA from somewhere Michael had never heard of, and had been with the company for 3 years. He'd never worked on a factory floor, never gotten his hands dirty, never stayed late to fix a machine that broke down at the worst possible time. "Michael, have a seat," Brandon said, not quite making eye contact. "I'm afraid I have some difficult news." Michael felt his stomach drop. He'd seen this conversation happen to other people. He'd watched them walk out with boxes. He'd told himself it would never happen to him. As part of our ongoing restructuring efforts and our commitment to operational efficiency, we're eliminating several positions across multiple departments. Your position is one of them. The words hit Michael like a physical blow. He couldn't breathe for a moment. "I don't understand. My performance reviews have always been excellent. I've never had any complaints. I've never even called in sick unless I absolutely had to." Brandon shifted uncomfortably in his chair, shuffling papers he wasn't actually reading. "This isn't about your performance, Michael. You've been a valued employee. But it's about the company's need to streamline operations and reduce overhead costs. We're moving in a different direction." "A different direction," Michael repeated, the word sounding hollow. "What does that even mean?" "It means we're implementing new systems and processes that require different skill sets. You'll receive 2 months of severance pay, and your health insurance benefits will continue to the end of the quarter. We'll also provide you with information about job placement services." 2 months, after 32 years, after all those double shifts, after all those holidays, after training dozens of employees who still work there. 2 months. Michael wanted to argue, wanted to point out all the years of loyalty, all the overtime, all the times he'd solved problems nobody else could solve. Wanted to ask how they could throw away 32 years like it meant nothing. But looking at this young manager who clearly just wanted this uncomfortable conversation to be over so he could get back to his spreadsheets, Michael realized none of that mattered. None of it had ever mattered. He'd been a number on a balance sheet, and now he was a number that didn't add up anymore. When Michael asked, his voice flat, "End of the day today. We'll need you to clear out your workspace and turn in your badge and keys to security by 5 p.m. Today." They were throwing him out today, not even giving him time to process it, to say proper goodbyes, to figure out what came next. Today, Michael stood up, his legs feeling weak. 32 years, he said. "I gave you 32 years. "We appreciate your service," Brandon said, the words sounding rehearsed. "HR will be in touch about your final paycheck and COBRA information." Michael walked back to his station in a daze. The noise of the factory floor, sounds he'd heard every day for 32 years, suddenly seemed distant and foreign. His co-workers looked at him with a mixture of pity and relief. Pity because they felt bad for him. Relief because it wasn't them. Not yet. He packed up his things slowly, carefully. 32 years of his life fit into one cardboard box. How was that possible? How could 3 decades of work, of dedication, of building something fit into one box? He turned in his badge to a security guard he'd known for 15 years. The guard couldn't meet his eyes. "Sorry, Mike," he muttered. Michael drove to the parking lot of a closed shopping center and just sat there for 2 hours, engine off, staring at nothing. He tried to process what had just happened. He was 55 years old. He had a mortgage with 12 years left on it. He had a car payment. He had a son, Daniel, still in college with 2 years to go. His daughter Sarah's wedding was in 6 months, and he had no idea what he was going to do. When he finally drove home, Linda met him at the door. She'd seen his truck pull up and knew immediately from his face that something was wrong. "They let me go," Michael said, his voice breaking. "After 32 years, they just let me go." Linda wrapped her arms around him, and for the first time since he was a child, Michael Carter cried. He cried for the job he'd lost. He cried for the loyalty that hadn't been returned. He cried for the future he'd thought he had. He cried because he was 55 years old and terrified. That night, lying in bed unable to sleep, Michael stared at the ceiling and felt terror unlike anything he'd ever experienced. He was 55 years old with a high school education, no college degree, and skills that apparently didn't matter anymore in the modern economy. What was he supposed to do now? The darkness. The first month after losing his job, Michael applied to 47 positions. He applied to other manufacturing companies, warehouses, distribution centers, retail management, anywhere that might value his experience managing people and solving problems. He got 3 responses. 2 were automated rejections. The third was an interview at a warehouse that paid $14 an hour, almost $20 less than what he'd been making. The interviewer, a kid who couldn't have been more than 30, looked at his resume and frowned. "You've been in the same place for 32 years. We're looking for someone with more diverse experience." Michael wanted to laugh. More diverse experience? He'd been rejected for having too much experience at one company. The loyalty that was supposed to be his greatest asset had become a liability. He didn't get the job. The rejection emails, when they came at all, said the same thing. "We decided to move forward with other candidates." Translation: you're too old. You're too expensive. We don't want you. Some companies didn't even bother to respond. He'd spend hours filling out online applications, answering questions about his skills and experience, only to hear nothing. Not even an automated rejection. Just silence. Linda tried to be supportive. She picked up more hours at the dentist's office, working full-time now instead of part-time. Their savings, which had been meant for retirement, started disappearing. First to cover the mortgage when his severance ran out, then the car payment, then the health insurance premiums that cost more than their mortgage. Michael's unemployment benefits helped, but they weren't enough. He watched their savings account shrink week after week. The number that had taken decades to build dropped lower and lower. $47,000, then $39,000. Then $31,000. His son Daniel called from college. "Dad, about next semester's tuition." "We'll figure it out," Michael said, trying to sound confident. "Don't worry about it. You focus on your classes." But Michael was worried. He was terrified. The worst part wasn't the money, though that was bad enough. The worst part was the feeling of being invisible, of being disposable, of realizing that at 55, the world had decided he was used up and done. He'd wake up at 5 a.m., his body still programmed for factory shifts, and have nowhere to go. He'd sit at the kitchen table with his laptop, applying for jobs, sending resumes into the void, and getting nothing back. Linda would find him there at noon, still in the pajamas, staring at job postings. "Michael," she'd say gently, "you need to get dressed. You need to get out of the house." "And go where?" He'd snap back. Nobody wants to hire a 55-year-old factory worker. The depression crept in slowly. Then all at once, Michael stopped shaving, stopped caring about his appearance. Some days he wouldn't shower. He'd sit in front of the TV, not really watching, just existing. His daughter, Sarah, came to visit one Sunday with her fiancé. She hugged him and whispered, "Dad, are you okay? Mom's worried about you." "I'm fine," Michael lied, just between jobs. But he wasn't fine. He was drowning. His old co-workers would call occasionally, inviting him to grab a beer after their shift. Michael would make excuses. He couldn't face them, couldn't face their pity, couldn't face questions about his job search that he had no good answers for. He started withdrawing from Linda, too. She'd try to talk to him, and he'd give one-word answers. She'd suggest things they could do together, and he'd say he was tired. He was always tired now, even though he did nothing all day. One night, 6 months after losing his job, Linda sat down across from him at the kitchen table. She'd been crying. He could see it in her eyes. "Michael, I need you to talk to me. Really talk to me, because I'm watching you disappear, and I don't know how to help you." "I don't know how to help me either," Michael said, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know what to do, Linda. I'm 55 years old. I've applied to over 200 jobs. Nobody wants me. I'm too old, too expensive, too stuck in my ways. That's what they think when they see my resume. I can see it in their faces during interviews. So, what are you going to do? Linda asked. Just give up? Just sit here and watch our life fall apart. What else can I do? Michael's voice rose. I don't have a college degree. I don't have computer skills. I can't compete with 30-year-olds who'll work for half what I need to make. The world I knew how to navigate doesn't exist anymore. Linda reached across the table and took his hand. Then maybe you need to learn to navigate a different world. I'm too old to start over. No, Linda said firmly. You're scared to start over. That's different. That night, unable to sleep again, Michael went downstairs and opened his laptop. Instead of looking at job postings, he started searching for something different. How to start a business at 55. Second career ideas for older workers. Skills you can learn online. He found stories. Lots of them. People who'd started over at 50, 60, even 70. People who'd learned new skills, started businesses, changed careers entirely. People who'd refused to accept that their best years were behind them. One story stuck with him. A 58-year-old former truck driver who'd taught himself coding through free online courses and now worked as a software developer. The first 6 months were the hardest, the man said in the video. I felt stupid. I felt old. I wanted to quit every single day. But I kept showing up, and eventually it clicked. Michael watched that video 3 times. Could he do something like that? Learn a completely new skill at 55? The idea seemed absurd. He'd never been good with computers. Hell, he still asked his kids for help when his phone did something weird. But what was the alternative? Keep sending out resumes and getting rejected? Keep watching his savings disappear? Keep sinking deeper into depression until there was nothing left of who he used to be? The next morning, Michael got up, showered, and shaved for the first time in a week. Linda looked at him in surprise when he came downstairs dressed in actual clothes. I'm going to the library, Michael said. They offer free computer classes. Linda's eyes filled with tears. Yeah, Michael said. I don't know if it'll work. I don't know if I'm too old or too stupid to learn new things. But I have to try. Because this, he gestured around, this isn't living. This is just waiting to die. The library's computer literacy class was held every Tuesday and Thursday morning. Michael showed up that Tuesday at 9 a.m., feeling like the oldest, dumbest person in the room. There were 12 other people in the class. Most were older, some even older than Michael. There was a 67-year-old woman who'd never used email, a 62-year-old man who'd lost his job in construction and was trying to learn basic office skills, a 71-year-old widow who wanted to be able to video chat with her grandchildren. They were all starting over. They were all scared. They were all trying. The instructor, a patient woman named Patricia, in her 40s, started with the absolute basics. How to use a mouse, how to navigate websites, how to create an email account. Things Michael's kids had known how to do since elementary school. It was humiliating. Michael's hand shook as he tried to control the mouse. He clicked when he meant to double-click. He closed windows by accident. He got so frustrated during the first class that he almost walked out. But he stayed. He stayed because the 67-year-old woman next to him kept making mistakes too, and she kept laughing about it. Well, she'd say, "That's not what I meant to do, but let's see where it takes us." After 6 weeks of twice-weekly classes, Michael could navigate the internet, use email, and create basic documents. Skills that millions of people took for granted felt like major accomplishments to him. Patricia pulled him aside after class one day. Michael, you've made a lot of progress. Have you thought about what you want to do with these skills? Get a job, Michael said. Any job. Or, Patricia said, you could think about creating a job. What do you mean? You have 32 years of manufacturing experience. You know how to solve problems, manage people, troubleshoot production issues. Those skills are valuable. But instead of trying to convince someone else to hire you, what if you figured out how to use those skills for yourself? Michael had never thought about starting his own business. That was for other people. People with money. People with education. People who weren't 55-year-old factory workers. But Patricia's words stuck with him. What if he could use what he knew in a different way? That night, Michael started researching. And slowly, an idea began to form. The idea. Michael spent 3 weeks researching before he told anyone about his idea. He'd noticed something during his 32 years at Anderson Manufacturing. Small businesses, the ones that supplied parts or services to the factory, often struggled with efficiency. They'd have production bottlenecks they couldn't figure out, quality control issues they couldn't solve, workflow problems that cost them time and money. Michael had helped solve those problems informally dozens of times over the years. A supplier would deliver parts late, and Michael would visit their facility to see what was causing the delays. He'd spot the problem in 20 minutes, suggest a simple reorganization of their workflow, and suddenly they were on schedule. The suppliers would thank him, sometimes offer to buy him lunch, but that was it. It never occurred to Michael that this knowledge, this ability to see inefficiencies and fix them, was valuable in itself. What if he became a manufacturing consultant? Someone small businesses could hire to analyze their operations and suggest improvements? He wouldn't need expensive equipment or a big office, just his knowledge, his experience, and the ability to solve problems. The more Michael researched, the more viable it seemed. Manufacturing consultants charged $100 to $200 an hour. Even if he only worked 20 billable hours a week, that was $2,000 to $4,000 weekly, more than he'd made at the factory. But the doubts crept in fast. Who would hire a 55-year-old guy with no consulting experience and no college degree? How would he find clients? How would he market himself? He didn't even have a website, and he'd only learned to use email 6 weeks ago. He almost talked himself out of it a dozen times. Then Linda found him at the kitchen table at midnight, surrounded by notebooks full of ideas and calculations. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "I have an idea," Michael said. "It's probably stupid. I'm probably crazy for even thinking about it." "Tell me." Michael explained the whole thing. The consulting idea, the potential clients, the pricing structure he'd researched, the fact that he had no idea how to actually make it happen. Linda listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "It's not stupid," she finally said. "It's scary, but it's not stupid. I don't know the first thing about running a business." "So you'll learn," Linda said, "just like you learn how to use email, just like you learn how to navigate the internet. You'll figure it out. What if I fail? What if nobody hires me? We can't afford for me to waste time on something that doesn't work." Linda reached across the table and grabbed his hand. "Michael, we can't afford for you to not try. We've lost more money with you sitting here applying to jobs that don't want you than we'd lose if you spent 6 months trying to build something. And at least if you try and fail, you'll know you tried." The next morning, Michael went back to the library and asked Patricia for help. She connected him with SCORE, a nonprofit that provided free business mentoring to entrepreneurs. His mentor was a retired business owner named Robert Chen, 68 years old, who'd started 3 successful companies in his career. First things first, Robert said at their first meeting, "You need a simple website. Nothing fancy. Just something that explains who you are, what you do, and how people can contact you. You can build one yourself for free using Wix or WordPress." "I barely know how to use email," Michael said. "Then you'll learn," Robert said with a smile. "YouTube is full of tutorials. You can learn anything if you're willing to put in the time." Michael spent 2 weeks learning how to build a basic website. It was frustrating. He made mistakes constantly. He'd spend an hour getting something to look right, then accidentally delete it and have to start over. But slowly, piece by piece, he built something. Nothing fancy, but professional enough. A home page explaining his services. An about page with his 32 years of manufacturing experience. A contact form. He called his business Carter Manufacturing Solutions. "Now you need clients," Robert said at their next meeting. "And the fastest way to get clients is to leverage the relationships you already have." Michael made a list of every supplier, vendor, and small business owner he'd interacted with during his 32 years. People he'd helped informally, people who knew his work. He had 23 names. He crafted a simple email explaining what he was doing and offering a free initial consultation. His hand hovered over the send button for 5 minutes before he finally clicked it. 3 people responded the first day. By the end of the week, he had 8 responses. 7 wanted to meet. His first consultation was with a small machine shop owner named Tom Kowalski. Tom had been a supplier to Anderson Manufacturing for 15 years. Michael had helped him solve a production problem back in 2016. "I heard what happened," Tom said when they met. "The way Anderson treated you was wrong. You're the best production guy I ever worked with." "Thanks, Tom. I appreciate that. So you're a consultant now?" Michael felt like an imposter saying it. "I'm trying to be. I thought maybe I could help small businesses solve the kind of problems I used to solve at the factory." "Well, I've got a problem if you want to take a crack at it," Tom said. "My production time on a particular part has gone up 30% in the last 6 months, and I can't figure out why. It's killing my margins." Michael spent 2 hours walking through Tom's facility, watching the workflow, asking questions. He spotted the problem in the first 45 minutes, but took his time to make sure he wasn't missing anything. "Your bottleneck is in the finishing stage," Michael finally said. "You reorganized your floor 6 months ago, right?" "Yeah, how'd you know?" "Because your finishing station is now 40 feet away from your quality control station instead of right next to it. Your guys are spending 20 minutes a day just walking parts back and forth. Plus, the lighting at the new finishing station is poor, so the work is taking longer and you're getting more defects." Tom stared at him. "That's it? That's the whole problem. Move the finishing station back next to QC and add better lighting. Your production time will drop back to normal within a week. How much do I owe you for the consultation?" This was it. The moment Michael had been dreading. He decided on $150 for an initial consultation, but saying the number out loud felt impossible. What if Tom laughed? What if he said it was too much? $150, Michael said, trying to sound confident. "That's it? Michael, you just saved me thousands of dollars." The consultation alone was worth way more than that. Tom wrote him a check on the spot. Then he said, "I know 6 other shop owners who could use your help. Can I give them your number?" Michael's hands were shaking as he walked back to his truck. He had a check for $150, his first paying client, proof that his idea might actually work. Over the next month, Michael did 14 consultations. Some were quick fixes like Tom's. Others required more detailed analysis and written reports. He charged between $150 and $800, depending on the complexity. He made $4,300 in his first month, more than his unemployment check. Not as much as his old salary, but enough to feel like maybe, just maybe, this could work. But he was still working out his truck, still figuring everything out as he went, still terrified that it would all fall apart. Then he got a call from a company in Ohio. They'd heard about him from one of his clients. They had a major efficiency problem at the facility and wanted him to come assess it. The project would take a week and pay $8,000. Michael almost said no. Ohio was a 6-hour drive. He'd never done a project that big. What if he screwed it up? Linda overheard the phone call. After he hung up, she looked at him and said, "You're going to say yes. It's a big project. I don't know if I'm ready." "You're ready. You've been ready your whole career. You just didn't know it. Call them back and say yes." Michael called them back. He said yes. The Ohio project went better than he could have imagined. He identified problems they'd been struggling with for over a year. He created a detailed implementation plan. They were so impressed they hired him to come back quarterly as a retained consultant. 6 months after losing his job at Anderson Manufacturing, Michael Carter had 12 regular clients and was making more money than he'd ever made at the factory. But he was working 60-hour weeks, doing everything himself and starting to burn out. He needed help. He needed to grow. And that scared him almost as much as starting had. Building something bigger. By the end of his first year, Michael was drowning in work. He had 18 regular clients, more leads than he could handle, and projects scheduled 3 months out. He was making $180,000 a year, more than double his factory salary. But he was exhausted. He worked 7 days a week. He'd be on the road visiting clients 4 days a week, then spending the other 3 writing reports and proposals. He was turning down projects because he physically couldn't take on more work. Linda noticed, "You're going to burn yourself out. You need to hire someone." "I can't afford to hire anyone yet," Michael said. "Once I pay the mortgage, the car, Daniel's tuition, and business expenses, there's not much left over." "You can't afford not to hire someone," Linda countered. "You're leaving money on the table every time you turn down a project, and you're going to make yourself sick." She was right. Michael knew she was right, but the idea of hiring someone terrified him. What if he hired the wrong person? What if he couldn't afford to pay them consistently? What if the work dried up and he had to let them go? Then he got a call that changed everything. A mid-sized manufacturing company in Indiana wanted him to do a complete operational assessment of their facility. It was a 6-week project that would pay $85,000, but he couldn't do it alone. It was too big, too complex, required too much simultaneous work. "I'll need to bring in help," Michael told him. "I have someone in mind, but I need to hire them for this project." "That's fine," the client said. "We just want the job done right." Michael thought about the people he'd worked with over the years. There was one guy who came to mind immediately, James Rodriguez. They'd worked together at Anderson for 8 years before James got laid off 2 years before Michael. James was 52, sharp, great at analyzing data and seeing patterns. He'd been working part-time at Home Depot since losing his factory job. Michael called him. "James, I know this sounds crazy, but hear me out." He explained the consulting business, the Indiana project, the opportunity to work together again. "You want to hire me?" James said, his voice skeptical. "Mike, I'm 52 years old with a high school diploma. I work at Home Depot. I'm 56 years old with a high school diploma, and I run a consulting business." Michael said, "The world told us we were done. Let's prove them wrong together." James was quiet for a long moment. "When do we start?" The Indiana project was intense. 6 weeks of 12-hour days analyzing every aspect of the client's operations. Michael handled the production workflow analysis. James dove into the data, creating spreadsheets and reports that identified inefficiencies I might have missed. They worked well together, better than Michael had hoped. James brought skills Michael didn't have: an analytical mind, attention to detail, the ability to communicate complex findings in clear, simple language. The client was thrilled with their work. They implemented every recommendation. Within 3 months, they'd increased efficiency by 22% and save over $400,000 in annual operating costs. More importantly, they told everyone they knew about Michael and James. The phone started ringing more than ever. Michael hired James full-time. Then 6 months later, they hired someone else. A 49-year-old woman named Patricia Chun, who'd been a quality control manager before getting laid off. Then a 58-year-old former plant manager named Robert Martinez. Carter Manufacturing Solutions grew. Michael moved out his home office and rented a small office space. They created a real company structure. They developed standardized processes and assessment tools. They built a reputation for solving problems other consultants couldn't. 2 years after Michael lost his job at Anderson Manufacturing, his company had 7 employees and annual revenue of $1.2 million. 3 years in, they had 12 employees and $2.1 million in revenue. They were working with clients across the Midwest, helping small and mid-sized manufacturers improve their operations. But the most meaningful part wasn't the money. It was who Michael was hiring. Every single person on his team was over 45. Most were over 50. All of them had been laid off from manufacturing jobs and told they were too old, too expensive, too obsolete. There was Kevin, 54, who'd been a maintenance supervisor before his plant closed. He'd been unemployed for 2 years, his confidence destroyed, before Michael hired him. There was Diane, 59, who'd been a production planner for 30 years before being replaced by someone half her age at half her salary. She'd given up on finding work in her field before Michael brought her in. There was Frank, 61, who'd been 2 years from retirement when his company went bankrupt. He thought his career was over until he joined Michael's team. Michael created the kind of company he wished had existed when he was looking for work. A place where experience was valued, where age was an asset, not a liability, where people who'd been thrown away by the economy could rebuild their careers and their confidence. They called themselves the Second Act Solutions Team, and they meant it. Today, 5 years after being laid off at 55, Michael Carter runs a consulting firm with 18 employees and annual revenue exceeding $3.5 million. He's 60 years old. He works less than he did at the factory and makes over $400,000 a year. But the numbers aren't what matter most to him. What matters is the 53-year-old former factory worker who called last week, recently laid off, asking if Michael was hiring. Michael heard the desperation in his voice, the fear, the belief that his life was over. "Come in for an interview," Michael said. "We're always looking for people with real experience. What matters is the email he got from Diane last month. 'You gave me my life back,' she wrote. 'I thought I was done. You showed me I was just getting started.' What matters is seeing people who've been told they were obsolete discover they still had value, that their knowledge and experience meant something, that it wasn't too late." Michael thinks about that day in the parking lot a lot, sitting in his truck with that cardboard box, feeling like his life was over. If someone had told him then what the next 5 years would bring, he wouldn't have believed them. He'd started a business at 55 with no experience, no connections in consulting world, and barely enough computer skills to send an email. He'd failed dozens of times. He wanted to quit hundreds of times. There were months in the beginning where he wasn't sure they'd make the mortgage. But he kept going, one client at a time, one project at a time, one small success building on another until it became something bigger than he'd ever imagined. Linda was right that night in the kitchen. He hadn't been too old to start over. He'd just been scared. And fear, Michael learned, is just a signal that you're about to do something that matters. If you ask Michael what he's learned, he'd tell you this. The world will try to convince you that after 50, your best years are behind you, that you're too old to learn new things, too old to start over, too old to build something meaningful. The world is wrong. Your experience isn't obsolete. It's valuable. The skills you spent decades developing don't disappear just because you hit a certain age. They're the foundation for what comes next. But you have to be willing to adapt, to learn, to try things that scare you, to fail and get back up, to believe that your story isn't over just because one chapter ended. Michael was 55 when his old life ended. He's 60 now, and he'll tell you these last 5 years have been the most fulfilling of his entire career. Not because he makes more money, though that's nice. Not because he's his own boss, though that matters. But because he built something that matters. Because he proved that starting over at 55 wasn't just possible, it was powerful. Every time Michael hires someone over 50 who thought their career was over, he sees himself 5 years ago. Scared, desperate, convinced it was too late. And he gets to tell them what no one told him. It's not too late. Your best work might still be ahead of you. Your second act might be better than your first. You just have to be brave enough to start. They said it was too late at 55. Michael Carter proved them wrong. And so can you.